A homeless woman attended a celebrity's wedding at the invitation of a millionaire. When she arrived at the party, a shocking truth was revealed. The corner of 5th Avenue and 57th Street in Manhattan pulsed with the frenetic energy typical of a Friday night. Executives rushed to catch the subway, amazed tourists gazed up at the gleaming skyscrapers, and bloodthirsty New Yorkers continued their routine unperturbed. In the midst of this organized chaos, Jasmine remained almost invisible, sitting on the cold floor with a small cardboard sign in front of her. "Please help." "God bless all," said the message, written in a surprisingly elegant handwriting for someone in her situation. His eyes, a deep green that had once shone with hope and ambition, were now opaque, bearing the weight of countless homeless nights and hungry days. Her hair, once a cascade of well-kept brown curls, was now tangled and lifeless, tied up in a sloppy bun. People passed her by as if she were part of the urban landscape, avoiding looking directly at her so as not to feel guilty. Jasmine was used to it. After 3 years living on the streets, she had become an expert at being invisible. Then something unusual happened. A pair of impeccably polished Italian shoes stopped in front of her. Jasmine looked up, following the fine fabric of the suit until she found a face that left her breathless. "Jasmine, is that you?" The voice was deep, with a tone of genuine surprise. The man in front of her was the embodiment of success, tall, well-dressed, with a watch that probably cost more than she had ever owned in her entire life. "I'm sorry, sir, but I think you might have me confused with someone else," she replied, lowering her gaze again. The man crouched down to her eye level. "No, I'm sure it's you. Jasmine Porter, right? We met at the Stars of Tomorrow Foundation charity gala. How long ago? 5 years?" Jasmine felt a chill in her stomach. That gala, the night that changed everything, memories that she had buried in the back of her mind began to surface. Ethan Blackwood," she whispered, finally recognizing him. A smile lit up his face. "Exactly. What a coincidence to find you here. Well, you seem to be going through a difficult time." Jasmine felt her face burn with shame. She wanted to disappear, to merge with the concrete of the sidewalk. "Life takes many turns, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, trying to maintain a shred of dignity. Ethan seemed to ponder for a moment, his blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "You know, Jasmine, I'm giving a reception tonight. Nothing too formal, just a few friends and associates." He paused, as if making an important decision. "Would you like to accompany me?" The proposal caught her completely off guard. "Me? But, look at me. I don't have the right clothes. I don't belong in this world anymore." Ethan smiled, a smile that seemed to keep secrets. "Nonsense. You belong exactly where you decide you do. Besides," he lowered his voice as if sharing a confidence, "your presence would be like a prize for me. Someone real in the midst of so many social masks." Jasmine felt her heart race. A part of her screamed that this was madness, that she should refuse and continue in her safe corner of invisibility. But another part, a part she thought had died a long time ago, began to awaken. I don't know, Mr. Blackwood." "Ethan, please," he insisted, holding out his hand to help her up. "Tell you what, my driver will take you to a boutique nearby. Choose what you want to wear. If, after that, you still don't feel comfortable going to the party, there's no problem. But if you do decide to go, I promise it will be an unforgettable evening." Jasmine looked at Ethan's outstretched hand. It was more than an invitation to a party. It was an invitation to return to the life she had lost. Heart pounding, she placed her hand in his. "It's okay, Ethan. I accept." His smile widened. "Excellent. Happy. My driver is just over there. He'll take care of everything." As Jasmine was guided to the limousine parked around the corner, she couldn't help but notice Ethan's intense gaze. There was something else there, something she couldn't decipher. In the luxury boutique, Jasmine found herself surrounded by dazzling dresses, sparkling jewelry and helpful saleswomen who, despite their initially skeptical glances, soon set about transforming her. Hours later, standing in front of the full-length mirror, Jasmine barely recognized the woman who stared back at her. The midnight blue dress hugged her curves, highlighting a beauty that had long been hidden under layers of pain and deprivation. Her hair, now clean and styled, fell in soft waves over her shoulders. The makeup, subtle, highlighted her green eyes and covered the marks that years on the streets had left. "Are you ready, miss?" asked Happy, the driver, with a gentle smile. Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the delicate perfume they had applied to her. "I think so," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. During the drive to Ethan's mansion, Jasmine fought a wave of anxiety. Memories of her previous life, of parties and galas, mingled with the years of fighting on the streets. Who was she now? The disgraced socialite or the beggar struggling to survive day after day? When the limousine pulled up in front of an imposing mansion on the Upper East Side, Jasmine felt her stomach knot up. Bright lights and the sound of music and laughter escaped through the windows. "We're here, miss," announced Happy, opening the door for her. With trembling legs, Jasmine got out of the car. In front of her, the mansion doors opened, revealing a world of opulence that she thought she had left behind forever. Taking a deep breath and straightening her shoulders, Jasmine took the first step into the unknown. Little did she know that beyond those doors, not only her past awaited her, but also a future that would change her life forever. The main hall of Ethan Blackwood's mansion was a spectacle of luxury and elegance. Crystals sparkled in the huge chandeliers, reflecting golden light onto the impeccably dressed guests. The buzz of sophisticated conversation and restrained laughter filled the air, mingling with the soft notes of jazz played by a live quartet. Jasmine hesitated at the entrance, her heart beating so hard that she feared everyone could hear it. Her eyes wandered around the room, taking in the opulence that had once been part of her world. For a moment, she felt like an imposter, a beggar in a princess costume. "Jasmine." Ethan's deep, warm voice surprised her. He appeared beside her, magnificent in his tuxedo, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "You look absolutely stunning." She felt the blush creep up her neck. "Thank you, Ethan. This is all a bit overwhelming." Ethan offered her his arm. "Don't worry, I'm here with you. Let's go." With a hesitant nod, Jasmine accepted his arm, and together they entered the hall. Immediately, all eyes were on them. Jasmine could feel the curiosity and speculation in the guests' eyes. "Who is she?" whispered a woman to her companion. "I've never seen her before. She must be a model or an actress," replied another. Ethan, seemingly oblivious to the whispers, guided Jasmine through the hall, stopping occasionally to greet guests. He introduced her simply as "my friend Jasmine," without offering any further explanation. As they walked, Jasmine began to relax a little. The scent of the flowers, the soft music, the clink of champagne glasses, it all brought back memories of a life she thought she had lost forever. It was then that she saw her. On the other side of the hall, surrounded by a group of well-dressed men who hung on her every word, was Victoria Ashford. Her platinum blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her bare shoulders, and her red dress was a cry of "Look at me." Victoria threw her head back, laughing at something one of her admirers had said, and at that moment, her eyes met Jasmine's. The laughter died on her lips. And for a brief moment, Victoria seemed to have seen a ghost. Jasmine felt the air leave her lungs. There she was, the woman who had once been her best friend, the same one who had betrayed her so cruelly. Ethan, sensing Jasmine's sudden tension, followed her gaze. "Ah, I see you've noticed Victoria. She's your fiancée," Jasmine added, her voice a tense whisper. "I know." Ethan looked surprised. "How did you—" "We know each other," Jasmine replied, looking away. "A long time ago." Before Ethan could ask more, Victoria was standing in front of them, her bright smile not reaching her eyes. "Ethan, darling," she purred, leaning over to kiss his cheek, her eyes never leaving Jasmine. "I didn't know we'd have such an interesting guest tonight." Jasmine straightened her shoulders, refusing to shrink under Victoria's appraising gaze. "Hello, Victoria." "Long time no see." Victoria tilted her head, her blue eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked very much like fear. "Jasmine, what a surprise to see you here. I thought you'd disappeared." The air between the two women was charged with unspoken history and repressed emotions. Ethan looked from one to the other, clearly realizing that there was much more to this story than he knew. "Life is full of surprises, isn't it?" Jasmine replied, her voice calm but with an edge of steel. "Sometimes the people you think you've lost forever reappear when you least expect it." Victoria gave a tense smile. "Yes, indeed. Well, I hope you're enjoying the party. Ethan has always been known for his charity." The comment hit Jasmine like a slap, but she kept her composure. Ethan, sensing the growing tension, intervened. "Victoria, darling, why don't you go and check if the chef needs anything? Jasmine and I have some business to discuss." Victoria hesitated for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, but then she nodded. "Of course, love. Don't be too long." With one last penetrating look at Jasmine, she walked away, her high heels echoing on the marble floor. As soon as Victoria was out of reach, Ethan turned to Jasmine, his eyes full of questions. "I think you have some explaining to do." Jasmine sighed, feeling the weight of years of secrets and hurt. "It's a long story, Ethan, one I'd rather not relive right now." Ethan studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right, but I want you to know that I'm here if you want to talk. In the meantime, how about a tour of the mansion? There's a terrace with a spectacular view of the city." Grateful for the change of subject, Jasmine agreed. As Ethan led her away from the main hall, she couldn't help casting one last glance at Victoria, who was watching them from afar, a glass of champagne clutched in her hand so tightly that her knuckles were white. The unexpected encounter with Victoria had shaken Jasmine more than she wanted to admit. Memories she had buried deep were beginning to surface. Shared laughter, whispered secrets, and the stabbing pain of betrayal. As she followed Ethan through the luxurious corridors of the mansion, Jasmine wondered what game she had gotten herself into, and whether she would have the strength to face the ghosts of her past. The evening Manhattan breeze caressed Jasmine's face as she and Ethan reached the mansion's terrace. The view was breathtaking. Illuminated skyscrapers rose against the dark sky, their lights twinkling like earthly stars. Below, Central Park was a dark speck in the glow of the city. Jasmine approached the balustrade, her hands touching the cold marble. For a moment, she allowed herself to close her eyes and simply breathe, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions that meeting Victoria had unleashed. "It's quite a sight, isn't it?" Ethan's voice was soft, almost reverent. She opened her eyes and found him standing next to her, looking not at the city, but at her. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her feel exposed and, at the same time, strangely secure. "It's stunning," she replied, turning her gaze back to the landscape. "It's been so long since I've seen the city from this angle." Ethan leaned against the balustrade, his body turned towards her. "Jasmine, I know we don't know each other well, but what happened to you? How does someone go from being a guest at charity galas to beggar?" she added, a sad smile playing on her lips. "It's a long story, Ethan. One I'm not sure I'm ready to tell." He nodded, respecting her silence. For a few minutes, they stood there side by side, watching the city. The distant sound of the party reached them, reminding them of the world from which they had momentarily withdrawn. "You know," Ethan began, breaking the silence, "when I saw you on that corner today, something told me that our meeting wasn't by chance. There's something about you, Jasmine, a strength that I rarely see in people, even those who seem to have everything." Jasmine turned to him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "You don't even know me, Ethan. How can you say that?" He smiled, a smile that lit up his eyes. "Sometimes you don't need to know someone for years to see their essence. You've been through something that would have broken most people, but here you are, standing up, facing your demons." His words touched her deeply, awakening an emotion she had long since buried: hope. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling tears forming in her eyes. Ethan approached, his hand gently touching her arm. "Jasmine, I know there's a history between you and Victoria. I'm not going to press you, But I want you to know that I'm here if you want to talk, and regardless of what happened in the past, you have a place here now." His closeness, the warmth of his hand on her arm, the gentleness of his words, all this made Jasmine's defenses begin to crumble. Before she could stop herself, the words began to flow. "Victoria and I grew up together," she began, her voice low, almost a whisper. "We were like sisters. We shared everything. Dreams, fears, secrets. I trusted her more than anyone else in the world." Ethan listened intently, his eyes fixed on her, encouraging her to continue. "When we turned 18, I inherited a considerable fortune from my grandparents. Victoria, she always had everything, you know, but somehow that wasn't enough. She started to change, to become more calculating." Jasmine paused, the painful memories making her voice crack. Ethan, sensing her distress, gently guided her to a nearby bench where they sat side by side. "What happened?" he asked softly. Jasmine took a deep breath, gathering the courage to continue. "Victoria convinced me to invest a large part of my inheritance in a business. She said it would be our chance to build something together, to be partners. I trusted her blindly, but it was all a sham." Her eyes filled with unshed tears. She falsified documents, embezzled funds. "When it all came to light, I lost everything. Not just the money, but my reputation, my friends, my life. Victoria came out unscathed, protected by her family name and expensive lawyers. I was left with nothing." Ethan was silent for a moment, processing the revelation. When he spoke, his voice was charged with emotion. "Jasmine, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Victoria never mentioned—" "Of course not." Jasmine laughed bitterly. "To the world I simply disappeared, a scandal quickly forgotten among so many others." Ethan stood up abruptly, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "That explains so much. The gaps in your past, your reluctance to talk about certain subjects." Jasmine watched him, a sudden realization hitting her. "You didn't know any of this, did you? But then, why did you invite me tonight? Why bring me back into this world?" Ethan turned to her, his eyes shining with a mixture of determination and something else, something Jasmine couldn't quite decipher. "Because there's more to this story than you know, Jasmine. So much more. And I believe that you are the key to unraveling it all." Before Jasmine could question him further, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Victoria appeared at the entrance to the terrace, her gaze alternating between Ethan and Jasmine. "Here you are," she said, her voice sweet but with an edge of steel. "The guests are asking for you, darling. And Jasmine, what a surprise to see you so comfortable." The tension in the air was palpable. Jasmine stood up, facing Victoria's gaze. Years of hurt and anger threatened to spill over, but she held back. "Thank you for your hospitality, Victoria," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Ethan was just showing me the view. It's really impressive." Victoria smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, it is. Ethan has good taste in everything." Her gaze traveled up and down Jasmine's body, a not-so-subtle appraisal. Ethan, sensing the growing tension, intervened. "Let's get back to the party, shall we? The night is still young." As they followed Victoria back to the main hall, Ethan leaned over to whisper in Jasmine's ear, "This isn't over. We have a lot more to talk about. Trust me." Jasmine nodded slightly, her heart racing. As she re-entered the world of luxury and appearances from which she had been exiled years ago, she couldn't help but wonder what complicated game she had gotten herself into. Ethan's revelations, the reunion with Victoria, the secrets of the past, everything was jumbled together in her mind, creating a complex and potentially dangerous puzzle. But one thing was certain: this night was far from over, and the real games were just beginning. The main hall pulsed with the energy of the party in full swing. Jasmine, Ethan, and Victoria emerged from the terrace, immediately enveloped by the soft music and the buzz of conversation. The guests' curious gazes turned to the trio, especially Jasmine, whose presence remained an intriguing mystery. Victoria, with a rehearsed smile, wrapped her arm around Ethan's. "Darling, Senator Johnson is looking forward to discussing the new bill." Why don't we go and say hello? Ethan hesitated, his gaze turning to Jasmine. Sure, in a moment. Jasmine, why don't you enjoy the party? I'm sure there are lots of interesting people for you to meet. Before Jasmine could reply, a familiar voice caught her attention. Oh my God, is that you? Jasmine Porter. Turning around, Jasmine found herself face to face with Marcus Holloway, an old friend from her college days. His eyes widened in surprise and, to Jasmine's relief, genuine joy. Marcus, what a wonderful surprise, exclaimed Jasmine, feeling a wave of relief at seeing a friendly face. Marcus wrapped her in a warm embrace. Where have you been, woman? We all thought, well, never mind, it's amazing to see you. Victoria watched the interaction with a calculating gaze, while Ethan looked intrigued and slightly relieved. Why don't you two catch up? Suggested Ethan, his tone casual but his eyes alert. Victoria and I have some guests to entertain. With one last meaningful look at Jasmine, Ethan walked away with Victoria, leaving Jasmine and Marcus alone. Marcus guided Jasmine to a quieter corner of the room, his features becoming serious. Jasmine, what really happened to you? One day you were on top of the world and the next, poof, gone. Jasmine felt the familiar weight of shame and hurt, but something in Marcus' genuinely concerned expression encouraged her to open up, at least partially. It's a long story, Marcus. Let's just say that I trusted the wrong people and paid a high price for it. Marcus nodded, understanding. Victoria. The name hovered between them, loaded with meaning. Jasmine just silently agreed. I always suspected there was more to that story than we were told, Marcus commented, lowering his voice. But Jasmine, you need to know something. Over the last few months, I've been hearing rumors. Victoria may not be as untouchable as you think. Jasmine's heart raced. What do you mean? Marcus looked around, making sure no one could hear them. There are investigations underway. Suspicions of fraud, money laundering. Nothing confirmed yet, but Marcus' words were interrupted by the arrival of Ethan, who joined them with a charming smile but alert eyes. I hope I'm not interrupting anything, said Ethan, his tone light but his gaze intense. Marcus smiled, quickly regaining his composure. Not at all. Just reminiscing about old times with an old friend. Ethan nodded, his gaze settling on Jasmine. Jasmine, there's someone who would very much like to meet you. Do you mind if I steal her away for a moment, Marcus? With one last meaningful look at Marcus, Jasmine followed Ethan through the hall. She could feel Victoria's gaze on them, but refused to be intimidated. Who wants to meet me? Asked Jasmine, curious and a little apprehensive. Ethan smiled enigmatically. Someone who could change everything for you. They stopped in front of an older man with grey hair and piercing eyes. Jasmine recognized him immediately. It was Judge Robert Hawthorne, famous for his unwavering integrity and for dismantling high-level corruption schemes. Judge Hawthorne, I'd like you to meet Jasmine Porter, said Ethan, his voice laden with a respect that surprised Jasmine. The judge held out his hand, his grip firm and his eyes appraising. Ms. Porter, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you. Jasmine felt a shiver run down her spine. It's my pleasure, Your Honor, but I confess I'm a little confused. The judge exchanged a glance with Ethan before turning his attention to Jasmine. Miss Porter, I'm here tonight not just as a guest, but as someone deeply interested in justice, and I believe you may be the key to unlocking a case I've been investigating for years. Jasmine looked from Ethan to the judge, feeling that she was about to be pulled into much deeper waters than she had imagined. What case? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The judge leaned in, his voice low but clear. The case that involves not only the fraud that destroyed your life, Missy Porter, but a network of corruption that extends far beyond Victoria Ashford. A network that, we suspect, involves powerful figures in this city and beyond. Jasmine felt the ground open up beneath her feet. Everything she had been through, all the pain and humiliation of the last few years, suddenly seemed part of something much bigger and more sinister. Ethan put a comforting hand on her shoulder. That's why I brought you here tonight, Jasmine. It wasn't just a coincidence. We need you. At that moment, Jasmine saw Victoria across the hall, watching them with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The weight of the revelations, Judge Hawthorne's presence, Marcus' words. Everything was mixing in her mind, creating a whirlwind of emotions and possibilities. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. Her life had once been destroyed by trusting the wrong people. Now she was being asked to trust again. But this time, with the promise of justice and redemption. "What exactly do you want from me?" Jasmine asked, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Judge Hawthorne smiled, a smile that mixed approval and determination. "We want you to help us expose the truth, Miss Porter. The whole truth, no matter who it hits," Ethan added, his voice low and intense. "This is your chance to reclaim not only your life, Jasmine, but to bring justice to everyone who has been wronged. Are you ready for that?" Jasmine glanced once more at Victoria, who was now chatting animatedly with a group of politicians, her bright smile masking secrets that Jasmine was only just beginning to understand. Then she turned her gaze to Ethan and Judge Hawthorne, two men who offered a chance of redemption that she had never imagined possible. With a determination that surprised even herself, Jasmine nodded. "I'm ready. What do you need me to do?" Ethan's smile widened, a mixture of admiration and something deeper shining in his eyes. "First, we need you to remain the surprise guest at this party. Watch, listen, and, most importantly, let Victoria see you reintegrate into this world," Judge Hawthorne agreed. "In the meantime, we'll start gathering the necessary evidence. Ms. Porter, your courage may be the catalyst we needed to finally dismantle this network of corruption." Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through her veins. She knew she was putting herself in a dangerous position, but for the first time in years she felt she had a purpose, a chance to right the wrongs of the past. "Let's do this," she said, her voice firm. As the three of them parted, each returning to the party with a new sense of purpose, Jasmine couldn't help thinking about how drastically her life had changed in just a few hours. From beggar on the streets to key player in a high-profile investigation, she knew the next few days would be crucial. The party continued around her, the guests oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. Jasmine took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, silently toasting the truth and justice she was about to seek. The game had begun, and Jasmine Porter was determined to be not just a pawn, but a decisive player on this board of power, greed, and redemption. The evening progressed, and Ethan Blackwood's party was still in full swing. Jasmine, now aware of her crucial role in the investigation, navigated the hall with a new perspective. Every conversation, every glance exchanged, every hushed whisper could contain a vital clue. Victoria, on the other side of the hall, kept Jasmine under constant surveillance. Her ice-cold blue eyes followed her former friend's every move. Jasmine could feel the weight of that gaze, a mixture of curiosity, distrust, and perhaps a touch of fear. While pouring herself a glass of champagne, Jasmine was approached by an elegant middle-aged woman whose smile didn't reach her shrewd eyes. "You must be the mysterious Jasmine," the woman said, holding out her hand. "I'm Evelyn Rothschild, an old friend of the Ashford family." Jasmine shook the offered hand, immediately sensing that this was no simple social introduction. "It's a pleasure, Mrs. Rothschild. I hope you're enjoying the party." Evelyn laughed, a melodious but calculated sound. "Oh dear, I always enjoy these gatherings. You never know what interesting secrets might be revealed after a few glasses of champagne, do you?" The woman's tone made Jasmine alert. There was something between the lines, a hint that she couldn't quite decipher. "Secrets are dangerous things," Jasmine replied carefully. "Sometimes they're best left buried." Evelyn's smile widened, almost predatory. "Or dig them up when the time is right. Victoria mentioned that you two have a long history. It must be interesting to be back in this circle after so long." Before Jasmine could reply, Ethan appeared at her side, as if he had sensed her tension. "Evelyn, I see you've already met my special guest," he said, his tone light but his eyes alert. "Ethan, darling," Evelyn purred. "Jasmine and I were just getting to know each other better. She's an intriguing addition to your party." Ethan smiled, placing a protective hand on Jasmine's back. "Jasmine has always been special. I'm glad she accepted my invitation tonight." Evelyn watched them for a moment, her calculating eyes assessing the dynamic between the two. "Well, I won't take up any more of your time. Jasmine, it's been a pleasure. So I'm sure we'll see each other more often." As Evelyn walked away, Jasmine turned to Ethan, her voice low and urgent. "Who is she really?" Ethan guided her to a more private corner of the room. "Evelyn Rothschild is more than just a socialite. She has deep connections to the city's financial and political world, and we suspect she may be involved in the network we're investigating." Jasmine felt a shiver run down her spine. "She seemed to know something about me and Victoria." "She probably does," Ethan confirmed, "but don't worry, that could play in our favor. The more they take an interest in you, the more likely we are to find out crucial information." At that moment, Victoria approached, her red dress contrasting dramatically with her pale skin. "Ethan, darling, the mayor has just arrived. Shouldn't we go and greet him?" Her eyes turned to Jasmine, a cold smile on her lips. "Jasmine, I hope you're feeling comfortable. It must be a bit overwhelming to be back, isn't it?" Jasmine straightened her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "Actually, Victoria, it's been a revealing evening. It's amazing how some things never change, while others—" She paused meaningfully. "Well, let's just say appearances can be deceiving." Victoria narrowed her eyes, clearly trying to decipher the meaning behind Jasmine's words. Ethan, sensing the growing tension, intervened. "Ladies, why don't we join the mayor? I'm sure he'll be delighted to meet you, Jasmine." As they made their way to the other side of the hall, Jasmine couldn't help noticing how Victoria clung possessively to Ethan's arm. It was a gesture that screamed, "He's mine," but there was something else there. Fear, perhaps. The mayor, a burly man with a rehearsed political smile, greeted them effusively. "Ethan, my boy." "And the lovely Victoria's, of course. But who is this lovely young lady?" Ethan made the introductions, and Jasmine noticed how the mayor's eyes widened slightly when he heard his name. There was recognition there, and something more. Concern. The conversation flowed superficially for a few minutes, until the mayor leaned towards Jasmine, lowering his voice. "Miss Porter, I've heard a lot about you. It's surprising to see you here tonight." Jasmine kept her composure, her heart racing. "Life is full of surprises, Mr. Mayor. Sometimes the past has an interesting way of resurfacing, don't you think?" The mayor's face paled slightly, and he quickly excused himself, claiming he had to greet other guests. As she watched him hurry away, Jasmine felt a hand on her elbow. It was Marcus, her old friend, with an urgent expression on his face. "Jasmine, I need to talk to you. In private." Casting a quick glance at Ethan, who nodded discreetly, Jasmine followed Marcus into a side corridor, away from the prying ears of the other guests. "What is it, Marcus? You look worried." Marcus looked around, making sure they were alone. "Jasmine, you need to be careful. Very careful. Whatever is happening here tonight, it's bigger than you think." "What are you talking about?" He hesitated, as if weighing up his next words. "Remember that project Victoria convinced you to invest in, the one that ruined you?" Jasmine nodded, feeling the old resentment resurface. "It wasn't just an isolated scam," Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was part of a much bigger scheme. Money laundering, bribery of public officials, manipulation of the real estate market, and it goes far beyond Victoria." Jasmine's heart raced. This confirmed the suspicions of Judge Hawthorne and Ethan. "Marcus, and how do you know that?" He looked away, guilt evident on his face. "Because I was part of it. Not directly, but I knew what was going on. And I kept quiet." Jasmine felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Marcus, her friend, knew all along. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "Because I can't live with this guilt any longer," he replied, his eyes pleading. "And because I saw you talking to Judge Hawthorne. I know something is going on, and I want to help. I want to make things right, Jasmine." Before Jasmine could reply, they heard footsteps approaching. Victoria appeared in the hallway, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the two of them together. "Well, well, what a lovely scene," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. Reminiscing about old times, I presume. Marcus straightened up, his expression tightening. Just catching up, Victoria. Nothing that interests you. Victoria approached, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Oh, but I am interested, Marcus, darling. Everything that involves our dear Jasmine interests me deeply. Jasmine felt the tension in the air, heavy and suffocating. She knew she was at the epicenter of something much bigger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Marcus' revelations, Victoria's attitude, Evelyn Rothschild's insinuations, the mayor's behavior. All the pieces were beginning to fit together into a sinister puzzle. Victoria, Jasmine said, keeping her voice steady. Maybe it's time we laid all the cards on the table now, don't you think? Victoria's eyes flashed with a mixture of fury and fear. Be careful, Jasmine. You have no idea what game you're playing. At that moment, Ethan appeared in the hallway, his expression serious as he assessed the scene before him. Is everything all right in here? Victoria immediately changed her posture, a fake smile appearing on her lips. Of course, dear. Just a little reunion of old friends. Ethan didn't look convinced. His gaze met Jasmine's, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded imperceptibly, indicating that she was fine. The party's coming to an end, Ethan announced. Maybe we should go back to the main hall. As everyone headed back to the party, Jasmine felt the weight of the evening's revelations on her shoulders. She had found the thread, but unraveling it completely promised to be a dangerous and potentially devastating task. Looking around the hall at the smiling, carefree faces of the guests, Jasmine wondered how many of them were involved, how many knew the truth behind the glossy facades and rehearsed smiles. One thing was certain. The evening might be coming to an end, but the real battle was just beginning. And Jasmine was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The party was coming to an end. The guests, drunk on expensive champagne and the intrigues of high society, were beginning to say goodbye. But for Jasmine, Ethan, and the small circle of people involved in the investigation, the evening was far from over. Ethan led Jasmine, Marcus, and Judge Hawthorne to his private office, an elegant room lined with dark wood paneling and shelves full of old books. Victoria, noticing the movement, tried to follow them, but Ethan stopped her with a firm gesture. Victoria, dear, why don't you make sure our last guests are properly ushered in, he suggested, his tone leaving no room for argument. Victoria's eyes sparked with anger and suspicion, but she nodded stiffly, turning away with one last penetrating glance at Jasmine. Once inside the office, with the door locked, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The tension was palpable, every person in the room aware of the weight of the moment. Judge Hawthorne was the first to speak. Mr. Holloway, I understand that you have information that is crucial to our investigation. Marcus, visibly nervous, nodded. Yes, Your Honor, I was involved, albeit indirectly, in the schemes of Victoria and her associates, but I'm ready to tell you everything I know. As Marcus began to detail the intricate corruption scheme, Jasmine felt her world spinning. Names of prominent politicians, respected businessmen, and even celebrities were mentioned, all part of a complex web of fraud, bribery, and money laundering. The project that ruined Jasmine, Marcus explained, his voice laden with guilt, was just the tip of the iceberg. It was an elaborate scheme to embezzle funds from several naive investors, channeling the money into offshore accounts and ghost enterprises. Jasmine felt a wave of nausea as she listened to the details of how she had been manipulated and betrayed. Ethan, sensing her discomfort, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. But why me? Jasmine asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why did Victoria choose to destroy me? Marcus hesitated, exchanging a meaningful glance with Ethan. It was Ethan who answered, his voice grave. Because you were a threat, Jasmine, not just to Victoria, but to the whole scheme. Jasmine stared at him, confused. What do you mean? I didn't know anything about it. Ethan sighed deeply. Do you remember your grandfather? Charles Porter, the man who left you your inheritance. Jasmine nodded, the mention of her beloved grandfather bringing a pang of nostalgia. Charles wasn't just a successful businessman, Ethan continued. He was about to expose this entire network of corruption. He had evidence, names, dates, everything. The shock of the revelation hit Jasmine like a thunderbolt. But he died before he could do anything. Judge Hawthorne intervened. Exactly. And now we suspect that his death may not have been as accidental as it seemed at the time. Jasmine felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her grandfather had been murdered, and she was unknowingly carrying the legacy of this investigation. Victoria discovered, Marcus added, that Charles had left clues for you, hidden somewhere among the possessions you inherited. By ruining you financially, she not only removed a potential threat, but also ensured that you never had the resources to discover the truth. The anger and pain that Jasmine had suppressed for years finally boiled over. Hot tears streamed down her face as she struggled to process all the revelations. Ethan knelt in front of her, holding her hands. Jasmine, that's why I brought you here tonight. It wasn't a coincidence. I used to work with your grandfather, investigating this network. When I lost him, I swore that one day I would complete his work and bring justice. And now, with you here, we finally have the chance to expose everything. At that moment, a deafening crash echoed through the mansion. The sound of breaking glass and alarmed screams filled the air. What was that? Jasmine asked, startled. Ethan ran to the door, but before he could reach it, it swung violently open. Victoria burst in, her eyes wild and a revolver in her trembling hand. It's over, she hissed, her face contorted into a mask of fury and fear. I knew I couldn't trust you, Ethan. All this time, you were investigating me. Ethan held up his hands, trying to calm the situation. Victoria, think carefully about what you're doing. Put that gun down and we can talk. Talk? She laughed bitterly. It's too late to talk. Don't you understand? This is bigger than all of us. If the truth comes out, powerful people will fall, and they won't hesitate to crush us like insects. Jasmine stepped forward, ignoring Ethan's warning look. Victoria, please. We were friends once. It doesn't have to end like this. For a brief moment, Jasmine saw a glimmer of the old Victoria in her former friend's eyes. Vulnerability, regret, fear. But it was quickly replaced by cold determination. I'm sorry, Jasmine, Victoria whispered, her finger moving to the trigger. But there's no turning back now. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Ethan threw himself in front of Jasmine. At the exact moment, Victoria pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the room, followed by the deafening thud of a body falling to the floor. Screams and chaos ensued. Judge Hawthorne and Marcus subdued Victoria, disarming her. Jasmine knelt beside Ethan, her hands desperately pressing the wound on his chest. Ethan, stay with me, she begged, tears blurring her vision. He coughed, a trickle of blood running down the corner of his mouth. Jasmine, the safe, behind the painting, the evidence, it's all there. Sirens began to sound in the distance, rapidly approaching. Judge Hawthorne was already on the phone, requesting an ambulance and police reinforcements. Jasmine held Ethan's hand, feeling it weaken by the second. Please don't leave me, she whispered. Not now that I've finally understood everything. A faint smile formed on Ethan's lips. You're strong, Jasmine. Stronger than you know. Finish what your grandfather started. As chaos unfolded around her, Victoria being handcuffed, police storming the office, paramedics rushing to attend to Ethan, Jasmine felt a strange calm envelop her. Years of pain, confusion, and injustice were culminating in this moment. Looking at Victoria, who was being taken away by the police, Jasmine didn't feel the hatred or thirst for revenge that she had expected. Instead, she felt pity and renewed determination. The truth had finally come out, but at a terrible cost. As Ethan was placed on the stretcher, struggling to stay conscious, Jasmine made a silent promise. She would expose the entire network of corruption, no matter who was hit. She would do justice not only for herself, but for her grandfather, for Ethan, and for all the other victims of this cruel scheme. The evening that had begun with an unexpected invitation ended with a clear mission. The game of power, lies and betrayal was coming to an end, but for Jasmine, it was only the beginning of a new journey. A journey of redemption, truth, and perhaps healing. 6 months had passed since the fateful night in Ethan Blackwood's mansion. Fall had given way to winter, and now spring was beginning to emerge in New York, bringing with it the promise of renewal. Jasmine Porter was standing in front of a large window in the district attorney's office, watching the city that never sleeps. Her reflection in the glass showed a changed woman, no longer the desperate beggar, nor the naive socialite of years ago. Her green eyes shone with a mixture of determination and hard-won wisdom. "Miss Porter," the prosecutor's voice brought her back to the present. "They're ready for you." Jasmine nodded, adjusting the blazer of her elegant suit. Today was the day she had been waiting for and dreading, the start of the trial that would expose the entire network of corruption that had destroyed her life and the lives of so many others. As she entered the crowded courtroom, Jasmine felt all eyes on her. Journalists jostled to get a photo, while the defendants, an impressive collection of once powerful figures, stared at her with a mixture of anger and fear. Victoria Ashford was among them, her haughty posture contrasting with her orange prison uniform. When their gazes met, Jasmine didn't feel the hatred she expected, only a deep sadness for what could have been. As she made her way to the witness box, Jasmine saw familiar faces in the audience. Marcus was there, his testimony crucial to the case. Judge Hawthorne, now retired, nodded encouragingly. And there, in the front row, was Ethan. Ethan Blackwood had narrowly survived being shot. Months of recovery had left him thinner and with a cane, but his blue eyes still shone with the same intensity. He smiled at Jasmine, a silent gesture of support and something more. Something that had grown between them during the months of preparation for this day. As Jasmine took the oath, she felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. It wasn't just her story that she would be telling, but that of her grandfather, of Ethan, and of countless other victims who couldn't speak for themselves. "Ms. Porter," the prosecutor began, "can you tell us about the events that led to the discovery of this corruption scheme?" Jasmine took a deep breath and began her narrative. Hour after hour, she unraveled the complex web of lies, fraud, and betrayal. She talked about her grandfather's investigation, about how she had been used as a pawn in a game much bigger than she had imagined, and about the night it all came to light. As she spoke, Jasmine could see the impact of her words on the faces of the jury and the audience. Shock, indignation, and, finally, determined resolve spread through the room. When the cross-examination began, the defense lawyers tried to discredit her, painting her as a bitter woman out for revenge. But Jasmine remained unwavering, her voice firm and her answers clear. "I'm not here for revenge," she declared, looking directly at the jury. "I'm here for the truth, for justice, so that no one else has to go through what I and so many others have gone through." At the end of her testimony, a heavy silence fell over the room. Jasmine knew that her part was done. Now it was up to the jury and the justice system to do the rest. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine followed the trial closely. Witness after witness corroborated her story. Documents were presented, and the extent of the corruption was finally exposed to the light of day. Finally, after tense deliberations, the verdict was announced. Guilty. Victoria and her accomplices would face years in prison, and the scheme that had caused so much damage was finally dismantled. As the courtroom exploded with reactions, Jasmine felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was Ethan. "You did it," he said softly. "Your grandfather would be proud." Jasmine felt tears of relief and emotion welling up in her eyes. "We did it," she corrected, squeezing his hand. In the days that followed, Jasmine found herself at the center of a media storm. Her story of downfall and redemption captured the public's imagination, and offers of books and interviews rained down on her. But in the midst of the maelstrom, Jasmine found quiet moments to reflect on her journey. One quiet afternoon, she visited her grandfather's grave, leaving a bouquet of flowers and a simple note. "Justice has been done." Weeks later, Jasmine was back on the terrace of Ethan's mansion, the same place where, months before, she had begun to unravel the truth. The city stretched out before her, but now it seemed different. It was no longer a world that had rejected her, but a place of possibilities. "What are you thinking about?" asked Ethan, joining her on the balustrade. Jasmine smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. About new beginnings. Ethan nodded, understanding. And what do you plan to do now? Honestly, I'm not sure, she admitted. But I do know that I want to make a difference, to use my experience to help other people who have been victims of fraud and injustice. You know, Ethan began, a twinkle in his eye, I'm thinking of setting up a foundation to help people like you who have lost everything due to corruption. Would you like to join me in this project? Jasmine stared at him, surprised and touched by the offer. Ethan, that would be amazing. He smiled, taking her hand in his. Jasmine, over the last few months, you've become more than just a partner in this fight for justice. You've become someone very special to me. I'd like to explore that, if you like. Jasmine's heart raced. She had felt the connection growing between them, but had always hesitated to acknowledge it, fearing that it was just gratitude or mutual admiration. But now, looking into Ethan's eyes, she saw something deeper, something real. I'd like that, she replied softly. As the sun set over New York, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jasmine and Ethan stood on the terrace, their hands intertwined, discussing plans for the future. A future that, for the first time in a long time, seemed bright and full of hope. Jasmine Porter had entered that party months ago as a broken woman seeking revenge. She now left not only with justice, but with a renewed purpose, a new beginning and perhaps a new love. As the first stars began to appear in the night sky, Jasmine made a silent promise to herself. She would use her second chance not just for herself, but to make the world a better place. Her journey from beggar to heroine was complete, but her story, she knew, was far from over. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter of hope, redemption, and endless possibilities. If this story touched your heart, then don't forget to leave a like. Use the super thanks located just below the video to directly support the channel and help create more amazing content. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Now don't miss the next incredible story that's appearing on your screen. I greatly appreciate your support and hope to see you soon. Thank you for watching.